Hey guys, Brian back with another video today. I'm going to show you how we built my ultimate miter saw station. If you want to see how we did it, stick around for another episode of Shop Projects. Before we get started, we're going to look at the plans, go over the cut list, and see what we need to cut first. I've laid out all the cabinet parts on sheets of plywood, done all the cut list nesting for you so you don't have to do it. So now that we looked at it, let's get going and get cutting. So the first thing we're going to do is start cutting up the plywood parts. You don't have to use a track saw, you can go straight to the table saw. I just find it easier to break down large sheet goods. It makes it easy to square up panels, and if you don't have a track saw, you can always just use a straight edge, clamp it down. I did that for many years. So for this project, I started ripping up, cross-cutting all the cabinet parts, door panels, rails, everything that I need to cut up first. I do cutting, milling, and then sanding and finishing. Kind of do everything in batch work. And you can occasionally check your parts for square just by checking in cross diagonals, and you'll see me do that all over, especially for these large panels. Next up, we're going to start setting up the dado stack on the table saw and cut the back dado, which will receive the back of the cabinet. I like to do this 1/2 inch by 3/8 dado. This makes for a really nice clean back insert and able to square up the cabinet in the same time. Now you're going to see me doing the edge banding. I like to do all the edge banding in one shot again. Iron-on edge banding, you can use peel and stick as well. Trim the ends, trim the sides, and then sand it nice and smooth. I'll post a link to all the tools that I use. I use mostly fast cap stuff for this type of work. Next up, we're going to use a solid wood edge banding, and this is just a rim miter on the countertops. I like to do this for countertop edges or shelves because it gives a nice durable edge that we can round over with the router, and it'll last a lot longer than just a normal veneer tape edge, which you can all do as an alternative as well because it's much easier to apply. We're applying glue, clamps, and you can use clear packing tape. Really helps to keep stuff in place while you're trying to figure it out. The most important thing when you're doing remitering like this is that the edges are nice and flush with the plywood so you don't burn through the veneer when you go to sand it flush. In this case, I'm going to use a router with a flush trim bit to get most of the meat out of this, and then I'm just going to machine sand them smooth. And with my trim router, I put a 1/4 inch roundover bit, and I just ran over all the edges, and this will give a nice durable edge for the long term. It doesn't get chipped out. As with all the cabinet parts, I'm going to pre-sand all this stuff before we put it together and pre-finish most of these cabinet parts. For the smaller cabinet, I decided to assemble it first, put it together, and then finish it. And for the larger cabinets, because they're so large to put in the spray booth, I decided to pre-finish it separately. So the first step with this middle cabinet assembly is to put the bottom in. I'm actually going to face screw these because you'll never see the screws once I cover them with the miter saw spacer. And you put them together flush, and I like to use K-body clamps to get everything really nice and flush top and bottom. And then you can pre-drill with a countersink bit and put your screws in place. So now I can repeat just the other side and just make sure I get a nice flush front edge with the veneer edge banding as well as side to side. So now with that cabinet in the spray booth, I can move on to the line bore holes for the 2 side cabinets for the adjustable shelves. I'm using a Craig jig here, which makes really quick work of doing this. I'm going to lay out a center line to reference for the jig, so I can do holes on one side and move it over and just mirror the holes for the other side. It's really easy to lay this out. Next up, I'm going to start drilling the pocket hole screws on the bottoms and the top rails of the cabinets. These will be concealed because they'll be under, and on the top side they'll be covered by a countertop. But these will provide a nice strong joint. Alternatively, you can do rabbets on the top and bottom of the cabinet and put these in, and it'll make them even stronger. Step here before we start building our cabinets is to lightly sand them and finish them. If you have pre-finished plywood in your area, I highly recommend you purchase it. The only reason I did this was this material is free. It was left over from another job. Otherwise I would just use straight 3/4 and 1/2 inch pre-finished plywood. It'll save you a lot of money and time, and it's just much easier to do this and you skip this whole step. So with 3 coats of lacquer, we have a nice durable finish to use, and we can start assembling the cabinets. I start by putting the back in the first center cabinet that we built earlier, and I'm going to square up this cabinet by checking the cross diagonals. And basically you check the diagonals, larger dimension you apply a clamp to get them both equal, and screw the back in place. Pre-drilling and making sure we don't come through the cabinet side, and this will hold the cabinet square and make it nice and stiff. Next up, on the center cabinet, we're going to put the casters in place. The other 2 cabinets will get furniture legs, but this will get casters if in case that I want to remove this and use this saw somewhere else. I'm going to pre-drill all the holes. I'm going to put actual torque screws on the side, and on the inside where I can through bolt it, I'm going to put through bolt hex bolts. And this way it'll make a really nice sturdy cabinet, because this is going to be a heavy one with the miter saw on top. On the inside of the cabinet, I counterboard for the hex bolt screws so that they're not sitting above the surface, they're sitting flush. And this way, when I put the wood in the back to prop the trash bins up, it's not in the way. In this case, I used Loctite. You could also use nylon lock nuts, but you want to ensure that these don't come loose over time. This surface removable Loctite will keep these screws in place for many years. Once the casters are in place, we're going to make 2 templates, and this will facilitate putting the hinges on the doors as well as the plates on the cabinets. This makes life a lot easier. I suggest you make templates for stuff like this anytime you're doing more than one of something. You can just take scraps, glue them together. I'm using 2P10, which is a 10-second CA glue, or you can pin nail this together. Then I'm going to take the paper template that came with the box of hinges, mark out the center line of the holes, pre-drill those, and now I've got 2 simple templates that I can use and make sure that every door goes in perfectly. I prefer to do this type of stuff on a drill press. You can do this with a hand drill with a jig. You can buy them that'll set the depth, but this way you can set the depth really accurately and drill perfect holes on every single door. Next, you want to put your hinges in place. I'm going to pre-drill them with self-centering drill bits and use hand tools to install all of these. Put this in the cabinet, and this will get you pretty close, probably within like 1 millimeter with using jigs like this, and then you can adjust these 3 ways to get them perfect. Next, I'm going to put the cam locks in place, and to hold them in place, I'm going to make a custom aluminum angle bracket, which I'll put in my plans that it'll catch on. This is not something I purchased, I made it. They're very easy. You basically just cut aluminum angle size, drill 2 holes in it on either side, and screw it in place. Now I'm just pre-drilling for the lock set. These are also very easy to install. You put them in place with a nut as well as a little lever arm that'll catch on the angle that we're going to put in place now. With the center cabinet complete, now we can work on the side cabinets. It's the same process. You take your two sides and your bottom, put some clamps on it, make everything flush, and put your pocket screw holes in place. I like to use clamps. Craig screws tend to move the joint inward, so you're not going to get stuff flush. If you put a clamp, it'll be perfect every time. Once the bottom and the top rails are in place, you're going to put in the center partition so you can screw that in place as well. The most important thing with this partition is that it's dead center. You can make a little storage stick or cut a piece of plywood that offsets it to center, and this way all your shelves will be the exact same dimension and you won't be cutting them down to fit. Lastly, we're going to put the back on just as we did with the center cabinet. We're going to square up the cabinet. I'm going to put some clamps on the cabinet to make it nice and square in case it isn't. And I'm going to pre-drill all my screw holes, put them in place. You can snap a line for the center partition with a straight edge and makes it go really easy. Here I'm just checking for square again, and like I said to you, if you don't have clamps large enough, you can take two clamps, put them together, and clamp it until both of those dimensions are the same on your cross diagonals, and your cabinet will be perfectly square. So one of the last things I have to do is make a quick template for the grommet that I'm going to put for the hose on the back of the cabinet. I basically cut out a hole, sand it with my little drum sander, and I fit the grommet as a nice friction fit in place. And this way I can use this as a flush trim bit. You can see with the router here, cut the hole out and then flush trim it perfect. And this will make a nice easy hole. I actually put two of these, one for the hose and one for the cord, and I actually moved it to the left side because I thought it would be easier if I had it closer to miter saw as opposed to the right side that you see here. Because the casters are 5 inches from the floor, we're going to use furniture levelers that are 4 inches and they're adjustable up to 3/4. So I'm going to add a 3/4 inch spacer and get that distance that I need, and add a rubber pad underneath it with carpet tapes to make sure it doesn't move. These are a little bit on the cheap side, so I'm going to put better ones in the BOM for you guys to use, but these worked out okay. Once I've got all the cabinets next to each other, I need to clamp them together, make sure that they're flush on the front and the bottom edge, and then I can pre-drill for these threaded inserts. I like to put these threaded inserts in with epoxy. That's what you saw me putting in the hole, and this way it ensures it doesn't back out. At first I was going to use handheld knobs to put these in place, but I actually switched to bolts. I found with the electric drill it was a lot easier to remove these if I ever want to use this miter saw separately than backing out with knobs. With those all level in place, now I can put our cabinet doors on. I'll put them in place, adjust them the 3 ways. They're nice, easy cabinet hinges to use, and we're all set. Before I put the countertops on, I want to make sure the cabinets are really level, and I want to do it front to back and side to side. And then I'm going to pre-drill about 6 holes that I can screw from underneath to put the countertop on. And I'll hold it in place with some clamps while I do that. I want to keep a nice overlay over the front edge and flush with the back. And here I'm using 1.25 inch Craig screws so I don't come through the top of the countertop. The top's in place, now I can install all my adjustable shelves and start working on the fence assembly. The fence is basically made up of a rip of plywood, a top Craig track system, as well as a custom angle piece I made for the bottom. The aluminum angle will attach the fence to the countertop itself, and all you have to do is cut an 8-foot piece of aluminum angle in half and drill some holes in it for attachment. Holding these pieces flush, we pre-drill with a self-centering drill bit again, both ends to hold it in place, and then we'll just go ahead and put all the screws in place in one shot. Before we fasten the fence in place, we're going to secure the saw, and to do this I'm going to pre-drill a couple screw holes through the top of the countertop, make a 1/4 inch plywood spacer, and put some threaded inserts again in the top to hold it down, give it really stout rather than just using wood screws. Putting threaded inserts from the bottom, I'm going to shim up in a washer where I need to make it above the surface. You want to keep the saw basically a 32nd above the plywood fences from the fence side and the bottom, and this way the wood will never hit in contact. You can see I'm taking a nice 4-foot level and making sure that it's nice and straight, but still about a 32nd of an inch back so we're never dragging against that fence. Lastly, I can put my trash bins in place, load up my tools, and I'm ready to go to work. So that's it. Not a terribly complex build project, and hopefully with the plans it'll bring some clarity with the BOM and you guys will be able to build this even faster and easier than I did. I tried to solve a couple problems in this. One, just building a nice set of cabinets. I've usually only built this out of a MDF top 2x4 base like most people do. It's never nice. The MDF gets moldy in the conditions that I live in. It's just not something I would keep for the rest of my life. It also heavily underutilizes the volume that you have underneath the saw. Either collects dust or scraps that you never use for 5 years. So I really tried to use this space to give myself nice cabinet space, sustainers, toolboxes, and really utilize that space to put all my tools away where I need them. The other problem I tried to solve was doing integrated trash storage, and that worked out really good. Having stuff where I can throw stuff, whether it's burn or trash, right at the saw. I'm not chucking it behind the saw like everybody does, and really try to clean it up. And lastly, I was trying to get better dust collection. I've used dust extractors on miter saws before, and that'll probably get half of it. And hopefully in the future with the dust shroud, with the 6-inch port over here, it'll really keep it contained. It's almost impossible to make a miter saw that's dust-free. It's just the way the saw is designed. But if you can contain it in one place, you can just clean it up every once in a while and it doesn't go everywhere. So hopefully I think I solved that as well. The fence is very sturdy on this saw. These cabinets are very stable now that I've got them on cabinet legs. I really suggest doing that in most cases, just doing adjustable cabinet legs. I had started off with casters. They're 4-inch casters, but I found that because my floor is on a slope, it's so uneven, I could not get the cabinets to not rack, and I really wanted them level so the doors and everything lined up. So I decided to switch it to furniture legs. In the end, I think it's the better way to go. You really do want stable cabinets when you're cutting stuff. You don't really want stuff moving around. It's just not a feature I think I use in the future. In the event that you do want to use casters on yours, you can easily use that and adapt that to the design. You might have to shim the caster down 1/4 of an inch with a piece of plywood, but you can do it either way, whatever works for you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Leave me some comments below. I'll answer any of your questions. There'll be a post as well as the plans on my website for you guys to check this out if that's something you'd like to build. And if this is something you'd like to see in the future, let me know. As always, thanks for watching my videos and giving me lots of feedback. It helps a lot to make content in the future. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care now.